Welcome, everybody, to this PayTrace webinar. My name is Sam, and we are excited to present to you a presentation on PayTrace's Acumatica solution for with Trace AR. Your presenters today are myself, the Partner Success Manager, also commonly known as the face of PayTrace. If you've been on webinars before, you've probably seen my mug. And joining me today is my partner in crime, Carlton Ortega, who leads up our solutions team. Welcome, Carlton.
Thanks for having me today, Sam.
Excited to have you on here. Um, We have a lot of content to go over today. So we're going to get right into it pretty quickly, but I do want to just cover some housekeeping for the live folks. If you are new to the webinar formats here with PayTrace, just some things to know. One is that you are muted. We don't do that because we want to stifle conversation, but we do want to limit distractions. With that said, if you have questions, comments, or emotional outbursts throughout today's call, please use the Q&A tool. Send those in, and Carlton and I will carve out a couple minutes at the end of today's presentation to cover any outstanding items that we need to go over. Um, Conversely, if you are watching the recorded version, of course, we can't talk to you through the screen as you watch this, but you can comment on the videos. You can reach out to us via the contact information that's provided, and somebody from the PayTrace team will respond. So, with that said, let's go ahead and talk about today's presentation. The name of the game is Acumatica. This invite went out to all of our sales partner channel. So a lot of the folks that are going to be on this call today are going to be more in the payment space rather than on the actual Acumatica ERP side of things. To kick it off, we're just going to do a little bit of overview on what is Acumatica. From there, we're going to get into some of the challenges that a lot of folks see today that are in that ERP space. And of course, how can we solve that? And then lastly, Carlton's going to take over and provide you a demo of our own Acumatica embedded payment solution. So we'll start off with what is Acumatica? Acumatica is a cloud-based ERP system. I should probably even backtrack and say, what is an ERP system? Enterprise Resource Planning, which is basically just a fancy acronym of saying it's a software that manages practically everything within your operation. You'll see on the bottom of the slide, it provides a lot of tools for financial management, which is phenomenal for us since being in the payment space, we do a lot in financial management. But it also handles things like inventory, warehouse management. It's a CRM, so you can track your customers, and it also does accounting, e-commerce, right? So you can see kind of checking the boxes on what this does. Payments is pretty central to a lot of these different functions that an ERP system is going to use specifically for Acumatica. Now, when we look at the ideal customer profile within the Acumatica software, we will find that, again, there's a lot of crossover between PayTrace and their clients. It's going to be primarily B2B. You're going to see a lot of suppliers, specifically in the areas of construction, manufacturing, and distribution. And size-wise, these merchants are typically going to be labeled as mid-market. I would classify mid-market. It's a pretty broad range when you look at the numbers. It's anywhere between like 50 million in annual sales all the way up to a full billion. Anything above that is going to be more of the enterprise level. Anything below that is going to be more of the small to mid-sized business level. Um, this is right in that sweet spot of that mid-market range. So really great software, and to be completely frank with you, there's a few other competitors that we'll look at here in a moment. Acumatica is one of the fastest growing in the space right now. They're somewhat newer and they provide some really good, robust tools for these businesses. So when we look at who is using Acumatica or how you get here, there is kind of an upgrade path. I mentioned that this is mid-market. When businesses start, very rarely, unless they're getting a ton of funding, they're not going to be in that mid-market space immediately. They're going to have to grow from a small business, right, from a startup into that kind of mid-market space. So when you look at that, these SMBs probably aren't going to be using Acumatica right out the gate. They might be using a smaller software like Intuit QuickBooks, Sage, or even a an ERP that might be more legacy, like Microsoft Dynamics GP or Great Plains. They have end of life support so with that, so a lot of those accounts are now migrating and trying to find what's the best fit for them, and Acumatica is checking a lot of those boxes. So as you're looking at your accounts, if you are prospecting, again, if you're in the payment space, um, you might want to see, are your merchants growing? If they are using any of these softwares, maybe do a check-in, temperature check. What is their long-term plan? Do they want to continue using their existing software, or are they exploring some ERP systems to scale with? Um, Also, beyond the upgrade path, you'll probably find some comparable additional cloud solutions like NetSuite, Microsoft Dynamics Business Central, and Sage Intacct all kind of fit the same model of cloud ERPs. They have very similar client bases. Nice thing about this is that Paytrace supports embedded payments and integrations for all of these different platforms. So while we are focusing today on Acumatica, I do want to call out if merchants kind of fit that same mold of ICP that we talked about, right? They might be using one of these, and we have some options for that. But if you are more familiar with NetSuite or Microsoft Dynamics, um, this will give you kind of a good comparison that Acumatica is going to be pretty aligned with what those are doing today. Now, how do payments fit into this, right? Specifically embedded payment processing. One thing to focus on is some of the challenges that a lot of businesses are facing, really around operational efficiency, I think is a big one, and cash flow. So while businesses might be using these solutions, payments don't come included, right? If somebody wants to process payments through Acumatica, they're going to need some type of embedded payment tool. And if they're not, they might be using something standalone, or they might be using more manual paper processes. So, challenge number one, slow payment cycles. Getting money in the bank quickly is going to be extremely important for a business, right? Nobody wants to have to finance against receivables. Nobody wants to have to wonder, when are they actually going to have liquid cash in the bank? So, by embedding payments and automating accounts receivable into some of these different solutions, we're able to expedite and accelerate the time to cash, right? Reducing daily sales outstanding. There's a lot of metrics out there on what average day sales outstanding looks like. A lot of the times it's upwards of 60 days for many merchants. We want to reduce that as low as possible. Also on here is disconnected buying experience. As these ERPs and Acumatica become more prevalent in the market, um, we want to ensure that not only do we, right, on the merchant side, have more of a modernized tech stack, but we also want to make sure that that same um, efficiency and experience is provided over to our merchants, or rather our merchants, our buyers, right, the actual end customers. So it behooves us on the supplier side, on the merchant side, to create a buying experience that's going to allow our customers to be happy, to actually enjoy making a payment instead of making them jump through hoops, having to cut physical checks, send that in the mail, and then wait for that to get deposited, right? Our customers, our buyers today, they want simplicity, right? They want to be able to use their virtual cards, their credit cards, ACH payments. And if we don't have methods to provide that to them today, right, they may look for other suppliers. And then lastly, there's just a lot of demand growth today in right? Getting more demand through e-commerce, and again, trying to modernize that tech stack. So, solution to all this, simple, of course, is pay trace. But specifically, we're going to talk about AR automation. And Carlton's going to get into some of these tools when we look at the demo here in a moment. This is a really cool graphic. I love this. It kind of shows what payment processing looks like without automation. You can see it's a multi-step process. There's a lot of opportunities for errors to occur, and it's very time intensive. It deals with a lot of printing and mailing of paper, a lot of different hands that might be touching this transaction, and it's just very inefficient. Nobody likes this. When we talk about accounts receivable process with automation, it's integrated into our native systems. It's extremely customer friendly. All it takes is a couple clicks for them to make payments. And then on the actual depositing side, right, we can actuate that money within a few days rather than having to wait 60 plus days for that invoice to be realized. So rather than me trying to explain verbally what the heck AR automation is and how this looks within Acumatica, I'm going to turn the keys over to Carlton to actually show you what that looks like.
Thank you, Sam. Let me go ahead and get my screen share going on here. As I kind of get this situated, Sam, I want to build on a lot of the ideas that you presented as part of this, right? The two real bullet points that I think adds a lot of value is the slow payment cycles and the disconnected buying experience.
Mhm.
When we look at a merchant and their own customers within an ERP, in this case Acumatica, it's very difficult to chase those customers to make payment, right? If Sam, I'll make myself a customer of your organization as we run through this demo, you would have to call me every time you want to issue me a sales order, receive a credit card, or expect me to mail you a paper check, and then we go through that 45-day life cycle we saw just on the previous slide. What we want to do within Acumatica is we want to improve that process by allowing you to save payment methods directly on the customers you're sending these invoices out on the day-to-day, weekly, monthly, whatever it looks like. And then two, automating some of that, right? We want to avoid someone calling you as the merchant. We want to avoid the paper checks. We want to avoid a lot of the asynchronous type payments wherever possible, and then still be able to satisfy those where possible in the event someone is on, let's say, a net 30, net 60, net 90 term. So as we actually get into the Acumatica demo, we cover three real core features, three real core scenarios. The first one is the aforementioned ability to save payment methods. The second one is the ability to send a payment link to your customers. And then third and final is the ability to use some of those automation tools to then leverage the save credit card in that first scenario and then automatically apply that to the document. So kicking us off into that first scenario, we'll head off into our customers and then use my demo CO test customer here for the remainder of this. One thing I will highlight on all, if not most of the screens is all this is native Acumatica. Our goal, our intent behind this is it being an embedded solution. We want to prevent as many additional clicks as possible and really keep the merchant on screens that are familiar to them. So as you have merchants using Acumatica in their day-to-day, this should be no different than what they're already doing, but we've added a twist, we've added a spin to that to then introduce payment methods that PayTrace supports. So as I navigate to the payment methods, you can see here my CO test customer that is a part of Sam's organization. He has two Visas, a MasterCard, an Amex, and an ACH saved. So through a combination of these, it can be one card, it could be 10 ACH, 10 cards, one ACH. You can create as many as you wish, add that to the customer's wallet, figure out what takes priority, what is active. In this case, I always like to keep this top Visa saved because we do see it's expired, but you as a merchant will always have the ability to make it inactive. And if we navigate to our PayTrace wallet here on the right side, you can see what is set to the default payment method. So as we look at the automation in the third scenario, what will be the card I actually use as the merchant to then automate some of the payment processing. Before we leave this scenario though, I do want to show you how easy it is to add in one of these payment methods. So all you do within Acumatica's native functionality is choose the payment processing center or the payment method. In this case, we'll choose our trace ACH to maybe add in another ACH method and then click create new. What happens when you click this create new button is we're prompting a screen that is completely isolated from Acumatica. So never be concerned from a security standpoint that we're exposing a lot of the sensitive data. All of this exists within a Paytrace window. So Sam, if I give you a call, I give you my routing, I give you my accounting, I give you the green light essentially to save this method and then use that moving forward. You would have to do this once and only once, and then continue to use this token, this reference of my ACH moving forward for any of those sales documents. Since I already have a few payment methods saved, we'll keep it that way and then segue us into our next process, is our next scenario, which is the actual sales document perspective. I always like to do this in a sales order rather than a sales invoice because I think a sales order really encompasses the entire selling process. So we don't segregate only a business that has physical goods, manufacturing, or procurement, and we don't isolate a business that might only have a digital-based footprint. So meaning sending licenses, training plans, things like that. A sales order will be able to cover both of those aspects as we get to the sales invoice process, which we'll take a look at in just a little bit. We'll go ahead and add a row, add an item, add a SKU that exists within your Acumatica environment today. So again, no different than what a merchant would do. I'll choose my favorite Acer laptop and I'll add in a quantity of 2 to this document and save the document. It's at this point in time that we can take the fork in the road to either of scenarios 2 or 3, so the payment link or the automation. We'll take a look at the payment link process first. So the moment I save that, you'll see a create payment link option open up here. As you click create payment link, here's where you can really see the payment processing piece kind of flesh out. So if you want to consider a customer with a net 30 term, you can always push out this expiration date to be, let's say September 23rd to give them that 30 days, and then choose any email templates you might have created within Acumatica today, add in any new emails, add in any carbon copies, any CCs, and then even attach the sales order to that. One thing that you can also leverage from a merchant perspective is maybe you want a partial payment. Maybe instead of the full 1,000, you just want to take the deposit up front. You can always include this amount here, adjust it, change it to whatever percentage you want it, or just make them pay that full outright amount. For the sake of the demo, to make it a little bit quicker, you do have 2 options there. You have the ability to email it to the email on file, or just create and copy and see what the end customer would receive if they click that link, which will choose a create and copy here. You can always see the status of your payment link under the Paytrace payment links. And then if I open up a new browser here, I'll be redirected to the actual document that the customer would receive in their email. So again, mobile friendly, desktop friendly, laptop friendly, however they want to view that email, click the payment link, they'll be prompted with this screen. Styling, of course, would be catered to the merchant. So we do have our Paytrace logo here, but imagine your merchant logo, your coloring, your styling, all that is adjustable. The part I do want to highlight here, though, is the actual document number. So in this case, we have sales order 480. If we come back into Acumatica, there is that one-to-one match of sales order 480 there. So in the event the customer wants to make payments through this asynchronous method, we will always bring this payment back into Acumatica. The merchant has to do nothing. We'll perform the reconciliation, we'll do the application, and then we'll close out the document so that the merchant knows they have to do nothing at the end of the day. They just wait to receive their funds in that T+1, T+2, whatever their funding timeline looks like. I'll escape the payment link process. We'll go ahead and cancel that so you can see what that looks like. And then this sets us up nicely for our third scenario. Instead of going to the Paytrace payment links, let's go ahead and go to the payments tab. We can see we have no payments processed here, but upon clicking, oh, I created one. Let's go ahead and delete that. Upon clicking create payment, this is where we actually leverage some of those automation tools, leverage some of those payment methods we saw at the prior screen, and then even introduce some additional options for the customer. So again, I'll be in Sam's shoes here. CO Test is my customer. I can use CO Test demo Visa that we saw under my wallet. I can create a new card in the event CO Test calls Sam and tells Sam, hey Sam, I have a bunch of cards saved, but you know what? I got issued a new Amex. Can you try it for this new document moving forward? And then if successful, use that moving forward. We always introduce a new card option. And then if I want to swap from a saved Visa, I can use any of those MasterCards or Amexes we have saved prior. One thing I highlight here, if you remember the Paytrace wallet, we did have 4 line items or 4 saved cards, But one of those being expired, one of those being non-active, we of course would not present that as an optional method for you to choose at this step. Before choosing an authorization and capture, I always like to pause here for a brief moment. The idea that a merchant always has a preference on when they take funds is something we take very serious and something that we always respect. So I'll give you the three flavors we've seen in the industry of the way people like to be paid. Some like to authorize at time of creating a sales order, and some like to capture at time of invoicing. Some like to authorize and capture at time of sales order. And then the third flavor, some like to authorize and capture at the end during the invoicing. We tie no merchants down on that process. They can continue to do what they do today. We just ensure that we give them the tools to do it at that specific time. So I'll take the more sophisticated, the step that requires a little bit more interaction from Paytrace, and only perform the authorization at this step. So what's happening here is we're looking up the save payment method within the customer record. We're now introducing a line item that we're pending processing on this payment. In a best case scenario, you do get an approval here. We get a successful card authorization for 1,000, but understandably, you might not always get this in a production environment, right? The cardholder might have insufficient funds. The cardholder might have suspected fraud. They might have just a generic do not honor. We will always present that failure to you, the merchant, to then prevent the document from moving forward so you do not have this false assumption that payment was received successfully. In our case, fortunately, we did get an approval here and the operation has completed. So now Paytrace has done its step. We take the back seat for just a little bit, and as the merchant moves their Acumatica sales order through the shipment, the pick, pack, and ship process, we play no real process in this. So you'll see me brush through this fairly quickly. The part where we do come into play one more time is the moment we confirm the shipment and the moment we generate the invoice, we're performing our second step, which is the capture portion. So referencing that example I gave you earlier, where I'm authorizing at time of sales order and capturing at time of sales invoice, you'll see I performed that capture automated. I did not have to manually go in there. And the idea behind that is we want to alleviate the amount of clicks the merchant has to do, right? If they're creating 1,000 of these documents a day, having to click 1,000 times is obviously time consuming. So why not try to leverage some of the tools that we have here? If I go to our applications, you can see where the status originally existed as an authorized status has now moved into a captured status. What this implies is the moment the end of day settlement happens, let's say that's 5 p.m. Eastern, we will immediately close this batch, change the processing status to settled, and then you would again expect those funds in that funding timeline you will have with the merchant account. In the event we don't want to use any of our automation tools, we really want to control the manual process, we do give you a nice capture Paytrace order payments button here. So if this was an open authorization, just clicking this button right next to the release will do that for you. And then I, as a merchant, now clicking this release, we've really completed the end-to-end experience from a sales document perspective. Generated a sales order with an authorization, closed out that sales order and moved it into an invoice, and then captured the open authorization tied to that. So for all intents and purposes, this document is done end to end. And the value that Paytrace brings is, and in one of the points that Sam mentioned, this removes the manual reconciliation. This would not require a merchant to pull a report from their gateway, find the exact transaction for 1,000 for this payment reference for this moment in time. Instead, we'll apply that directly to the document, close out the document, and then remove that reconciliation portion from the merchant's day-to-day. I'll close out here under our payments and applications before I pass this one back off to you, Sam. This is really the bread and butter and all the interactions that Paytrace is doing as part of that. So when we consider from an accounting perspective of someone who wants to know we're doing this accurately, if I choose this topmost line item, which is at 1,000, we just saw not too long ago, here's the document that we actually applied the payment against. Here's the credit card that was used. If we navigate to the sales order, here's that sales order 480 that we saw in the very second scenario at the beginning of that, where we are applying the payment to that. And then in the event you want to unapply this payment, make it a floating credit of 1,000, you can of course do that by reversing that. Or if you want to see all of the credit card processing we've done, we'll also give you that capability. So this is a long-winded way of me showing you that never does a merchant ever have to bring these data, bring these transaction points, bring these references into their ERP. Leave that all entirely to Paytrace, remove some of the manual reconciliation, and then to Sam's point again, that 45 days of receiving a paper check, I ran through a full end-to-end process today within what, maybe 5 minutes, and that extrapolated into a merchant's day to day, you can likely reduce a step that might take a couple of hours into something you might be able to knock out within an hour. With that, Sam, I'll pass this one back off to you.
I love that. Thank you, Carlton. And I want to just really emphasize a couple of the things that you mentioned there. Um, let me get that screen pulled back up here. Um, the reconciliation part, right? You can find for all of these integrated payment solutions, you can always find saying, "Oh, you can take payments in this, you can take payments in that." That doesn't mean it's native. That doesn't mean it's embedded. And it doesn't mean it starts you from point A and takes you all the way through the full payment cycle. With Trace AR for Acumatica, we are starting from that initial sales order all the way to the time that that transaction's deposited, and you can make sure that your books are good. Right? If you're just putting in a quick little payments insertion into that, where it's like, yeah, you can process a credit card, right? We do credit card, we do ACH, and we're also validating that the payments line up to the invoices, the deposits are getting in correctly, and those are closed out properly. Because when you don't do that, it's going to lead to a lot of headaches for accountants. It's going to lead to errors, right? And then you're trying to figure out, well, where'd this money come from, or where's the gap in this? This is solving a lot of those pain points. So, a lot of value proposition in this thing. Now, I would be remiss if I went through a pay trace presentation and didn't mention interchange optimization. We have to bring it up. It's pay trace. Is interchange optimization valid within Acumatica? Of course it is. Absolutely. This is going to be another one of those things that sets pay trace apart from a lot of the other solutions that are out there. What's great about this is because of the fact that a majority of the transactions that a merchant's going to process through Acumatica are going to be business to business, and it is going to already include that enriched line item level information. A majority of the transactions, if not practically all of them, should be qualifying at essentially level three or product three rates for Visa and MasterCard if cards are being processed, right? If it is Visa and MasterCard. So this is going to have a huge financial impact, not only on the operational efficiency side, where we're saving dollars and cents on making making staff more efficient and less errors, but you're also going to see that on the card processing side, where we're going to be able to knock off, you know, dozens of basis points, if not, over 100 basis points in some instances by automating how all that data is being added and processed and remitted back to the card brands. So um, you get dollar savings on top of that as well. Now, the last thing I want to bring up is with PayTrace, we are not using a third party for this. So when you work with PayTrace on this Acumatica solution, what's nice is that you really get the full payment stack with us. Um, you get the payment gateway, right? That's kind of the foundation of PayTrace. If you've worked with us for a while, you know that we are founded as a gateway, but we've expanded beyond that. We now will offer merchant services. So if you need a great merchant service provider, we've got partner programs for that. We'd love to chat with you about that. If you provide your own merchant services, great. You can absolutely plug in there if you're already a partner with us. Um, but we are going to be essentially that one-stop shop, that one point of contact. And not only that, but we also, right, we're going to be providing all of these great AR automation tools. One thing I would also put on the top of this pyramid would be ACH. Carlton did a great job inserting that into some of the transactions that we saw. But we also offer our own ACH rails, so you don't need to go track down a third party for that. Everything is housed within PayTrace. And you're going to find that in this space, while we love card and we love to focus on card, ACH is still king, right? In a lot of these larger B2B types of transactions, ACH is extremely important. So you need to have options for all methods of payments. And of course, right? If you have worked with PayTrace, if you've been a partner with us for a while, you know that um, our customer support, our client services team is truly unmatched. So when you work with us, you know that you're going to get this with minimal friction, with great training and great support, so that when you have questions when this is being rolled out and implemented, you're going to be working with a team of experts. So, with that said, here's some resources that I want to throw out there. If you are not subscribed to our blog and to our YouTube channel, please do so. A lot of information. We're constantly updating our systems, adding new solutions. We actually have a few new products coming up here on the roadmap, probably in the next quarter. So if you're not on our blog, if you're not on our YouTube channel, you're probably not going to see that very easily. So check those out if you are, a sales partner or you're on the payment side of things, a lot of good education resources. And you can always reach out to us directly. You can contact us at sales@paytrace.com. If you need some more technical questions, I actually have Carlton's direct email on here. Apologize for that, Carlton, but you've mentioned that you want to work directly with our partners and with our merchants. So you can reach out to Carlton on solutions or through our sales team. So, with that said, we're going to open this up for Q&A. On the live one, it looks like I only have one question that came through, and of course, it's going to be about costs. That's always going to be the big question. And what is the cost for this? Unfortunately, I'm going to have to be a little bit vague because different partner agreements and different merchant agreements determine cost. So I can't give you a definitive answer on here. But what I can say is if you have questions about costs, please reach out to our sales team. We can make sure that you have a current Schedule A, or we can give you some accurate pricing if you're looking for this for yourself to use as an Acumatica solution. All right. Well, I think we are at time. Yeah, we're actually over time by a couple minutes. I want to thank you all for joining us today, and specific shout out to my colleague Carlton. Phenomenal job as always running us through that demo.
Thank you, Sam, and thanks for all the attendees today.
All right. We're going to close this out. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your week.